Come out with us and play, love your London, have a banana. On today's episode of Love Your London, we continue on our leisurely stroll alongside Old Father Thames as we make our way towards Mortlake. We'll be talking about the various industries that made the area its home, from tapestry to pottery to brewery. We'll be telling you all about an intrepid explorer who is buried here, and we'll be visiting Mortlake Station, not far from the finish line of the famous boat race. But we'll be starting this episode at a different station, Barnes Bridge, one that we had hoped to cover at the end of the previous episode, but were attacked by thousands of midges, some of which we ended up breathing in, making it impossible to film at dusk. So we returned to the scene the following morning.
This train is now approaching Barnes Bridge.
Fantastic. Well, there you go. We're just going to Barnes Bridge now. Okay, so as we walk from one platform to the other, mainly just to show you what the same scene looks like without millions of midges flying through the air, I'm going to continue this bit as a voiceover. Now, you'll have also seen all those steps, and there is no lift, which makes this yet another station that is not accessible for all. Cue the boos. Barnes Bridge Station is in Zone 3 and it has no toilets, so even more boos. The station is part of the National Rail System, but it's not as old as the 1846 Barnes Station, which we visited in episode 1 of this series. Barnes Bridge is a mere juvenile, opening as recently as 1916, so during World War I. It has just the 2 platforms, unlike the 4 that Barnes Station boasts, but it's actually much closer to Barnes Village, which we of course visited in episode 2 of this series. Incidentally, while we show you some more of the footage of the midges from the previous evening, let us take this opportunity to remind you please to hit the like button, share this video on your social media, subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already, it's free, and press the notification bell for new episode alerts, and you can of course also become our patron via Patreon. Oh, that charming building over there is now some sort of physio's, but it used to be the ticket office. Here we are passing it the following morning. As for the bridge itself, it's Grade 2 listed, and it dates from 1895, though there has been a railway bridge here since 1849. It's one of only 3 London bridges that combines both railways and pedestrian access, though don't expect to stand on it during the annual Oxford v Cambridge boat race, as pedestrians have been banned from the bridge on that day for a few years now owing to overcrowding. A very new addition to the bridge's infrastructure can just be made out on the other side. That's the brand new Duke's Meadows footbridge, which goes underneath Barnes Railway Bridge, allowing pedestrians not to have to leave the riverside at that place. But since that is on the Chiswick side of the river, and we should be covering Chiswick next year, we'll return to that then. Now, you do see the occasional grey and common seal in this area, and we'd love to have told you about how clean the Thames is these days, but sadly that is not the case. In 2022 alone, more than 2 billion litres of raw sewage were discharged into the Thames in just 48 hours. And just last November, the BBC announced that there have been a whopping 72 billion litres of sewage discharged just in the last 3 years. Not to mention the 94,000 microplastics per second that flow downstream in places, some of the highest recorded levels of microplastics for any river in the world. It got so bad that at the 2024 boat race, the winning Cambridge team could not risk the health of their cocks by tossing him into the Thames as per tradition, a race that they won not just thanks to their clever tactics, but also, it must be said, thanks to the health of the Oxford team, some of whom had been affected by E. coli. But anyway, let's get back to our stroll last summer as we start to approach the White Hart. Okay, so here we have a pub called White Hart. Now, there used to actually be a pier here where you could travel to Margate from this pub, from the pub straight to Margate. There used to be a little boat that would take you. This is a lovely old pub. As you can see, this actually has a fantastic sunset place, because you can sit out there on the balcony of the pub and look down towards Chiswick Bridge. The sun sets over there and it's absolutely fantastic. There's a nice long stretch of river that you can see past that bend when you're on the balcony up there. So as you can see there, it says White Hart again, and up there it says White Hart on the sign. Didn't used to say White Hart, it used to say the White Hart. The spelt with a thorn, you know, the old Y-E, which people mistakenly think is pronounced ye, but it's not the personal pronoun ye, as in you familiar plural, or you when talking to a member of the nobility. The letter sets that they imported from Belgium, Caxton and that lot, didn't have the thorn in their alphabet, so they just instead did a Y with a little sort of like thing on top, and that meant the. But it used to be ye, or the White Hart. They removed it, so I want to ask them in there why they removed the thorn. Find out, because I'm quite interested, because it's a nice old sign. Why have they rebranded? I mean, there's no need to rebrand something like that. It's always been YE, the White Hart. So let's go inside and and ask them.
Oh gosh! All right, let's walk out into traffic. All right.
Yeah, we wanted to ask you, why did you remove the thorn?
The thorn?
Yeah.
Asking me, I have no idea.
Oh, okay. You know, there used to be spelled Y-E, White Hart, and it's now just called White Hart. I just wondered if you knew why they removed that.
I have no idea, mate.
Yeah, it used to be called, there's a sign up there, if you look on Google Street View, you can see it used to be called Ye, well, it's pronounced the White Hart, so it's now just called White Hart. But you don't know why there's no thorn. Okay.
Pints, mate.
All right, they're only pouring pints. No, not to worry, not to worry. Do you mind if we just just going to walk around and go straight out? Thank you.
You're going to take pints, so might as well be in a lovely place.
Yes.
Oh, there's the not necessarily White Hart.
There we go. He didn't really know why the thorn was taken out of the name. I don't. Anyway, it dates back to the 17th century, and it was built in 1662, and then part of it was rebuilt in 1899. And they actually have. There's an open kitchen upstairs that has its own smokery as well. So the food in here is really great. Read some great reviews. If you remember, we talked about Barnes Football Club, the old original Barnes Football Club that was started by Ebenezer Cobb Morley. Well, this back then was their headquarters. They used to have it in here. This is where they would meet from 1862 onwards to discuss how Barnes Football Club was going to be run, and also to discuss how the FA, the original rules of football, were going to be applied game. So there you see it, White Hart. Doesn't sound the same as the White Hart. Just over here we have the restaurant owned by Rick Stein, no less. In fact, it's Rick Stein's only London restaurant. Of course, he has loads in Cornwall. If you don't know, he's a very famous chef who made his name really talking about fish and writing about fish. He's had a number of really engaging cookery programs on TV. This is Rick Stein's restaurant. He has loads of them in Cornwall, and he also has one in Dorset and another one in Wiltshire. But we love your London, and we're only interested in this one, in lovely London. Considering it's run by such a famous chef, the prices are not outrageous. In fact, they compare to the prices of most pubs around here. A bottle of wine is about 30 quid, and fish and chips are about £18, but it's meant to be outstanding. But also for the quality of the view, well, I mean, you can't really beat it. So if you want to treat yourself to a lovely meal, come to Rick Stein's. We're now going to walk down here because we've got a couple of very interesting churches to show you. This garden here, this is John Dee's old garden. He was a mathematician, an alchemist, an astrologer, an astronomer, a geographer and a navigator. Basically, at the time, he died in 1609, at the time his library was the largest in the whole of England. Even Queen Elizabeth I came here to visit him on a number of occasions, and his memorial is actually in the church just opposite St Mary the Virgin of Mortlake. We're gonna check that out in a second, but first of all, just want to talk here about the lower Dutch house, which was here. This is Mortlake Tapestry Works, 1619 to 1703. This is where the building was, where the huge tapestry works were. Very, very famous for its tapestry. For not a very long period, Mortlake was very famous. It was founded in 1619, it closed in 1704, but during that time it created some of the most amazing tapestries. It was a brainchild of King James I, and it was managed by Sir Francis Crane, for which he was paid handsomely, and part of the deal was that he had the exclusive right to weave tapestries for 21 years, free of all customs duties. Now, there weren't very many specialist tapestry weavers in England at the time, so he sort of smuggled in illegally. Well, so he brought in over from Flanders, some say 50, some say 140 specialists in tapestry to do his business, and also with the promise that they would then get English nationality afterwards. It was all part of the deal, so you could bring these people in. So they were granted citizenship here in order to provide this valuable service, because obviously the King James I, it was all his idea, and in fact Francis Crane was very lucky, because the City of London also paid for orphans to get a 7-year apprenticeship to learn the trade, which meant that after the Flemish experts died, the orphans would take over. So it became a very lucrative business, unfortunately for Sir Francis. King Charles I later became a major patron. He won the best churchyard competition in 2001, as it happened. Now,
Squeakiest gate too.
yes. Now there is a plaque here. So you see that plaque up there on the wall? It says Vivat RH8 1543, which would be Latin for long live, that's Vivat RH8 Rex Henricus 8 1543. However, that plaque I don't believe is as old as 1543. Some people say it is. I don't think it is. I think it would have said RHVIII, to be honest, rather than
The Arabic numeral.
rather than Arabic numeral of RH8, because kings, there always would be, especially in inscriptions like that, it would always be VIII. So
Arabic numerals were far too proletarian.
Yes, so it's not. It's probably not. In fact, there is a study. I don't know if they actually come to the same conclusion. But if you're interested, then if you read Bridget Cherry and Nicolaus Pevsner's The Buildings of England from 3, you'll actually they actually talk about the age of that plaque and why they think it's not that old. I haven't actually read that, but I also would agree that it doesn't look that old because of RH8. Anyway, we're very near another church. This is an Anglican church. There's a Roman Catholic church down there, which is even more fascinating. Just while we show you a little more footage from the wonderful and award-winning churchyard of St Mary the Virgin, Mortlake, and before we visit Mortlake's other famous church around the corner, we just wanted to mention one of the other industries that Mortlake is really famous for: pottery. There were 2 factories in this area which produced some of the most delightful jugs. Just like with the tapestry industry, being really close to the river was very important for pottery, mainly because of all the clay that had to be transported, not to mention the coal that would be used for the kilns. Now, the first pottery started in 1744 by John Sanders, but it was actually the second pottery, founded by one of Sanders' former employees, Joseph Kinshere, which became extremely famous and which continued until 1847. Now, they are very collectible and quite distinguishable because of those plaques that you can see that were moulded separately and stuck onto the pots during the firing process. Another distinguishing feature is that brown iron oxide wash that you can see on the upper part of these pots. Now there is of course a book about it, and we have provided an Amazon affiliate link in the description where currently you can pick up a second-hand copy for under £8, which is a total bargain. As you can imagine, if you look along the foreshore of the Thames, you will see plenty of the remains of the old Mortlake pottery business, though we must remind you that you need a mudlarking permit to do this. We created a special episode about mudlarking a little while ago, and there's a link in the description and at the end of this video. However, evidence of the pottery is literally everywhere. Early in the day, in fact, when we left Barnes Station, which we visited in the first episode of this series, we happened upon, on the pathway, a little piece of local pottery which was clearly from that period. While you don't need a mudlarking permit to pick that up, please leave it there. It's all part of the local area and its amazing history. Anyhow, let's now check out the other neighbouring church.
Okay, so here we are. This is a Catholic church, Roman Catholic church. It's also dedicated to St Mary, but to St Mary Magadalen. St Mary Magdalen's Roman Catholic church, just really behind the other church that we were at a few moments ago. This is the beautiful St Mary Magdalen Roman Catholic church, built in 1852 in the Gothic Revival style. And the window you're looking at now there is of Richard Burton. Now, not the Welsh actor who married Liz Taylor, but another Richard Burton, Sir Richard Burton. He was the explorer, and he was born on the 19th of March 1821, which is St Joseph's Day. That's why he's shown here as a knight alongside St Joseph and of course St Mary Magdalen, to whom this church is dedicated. Now, he was a really fascinating character. He has this mausoleum in there, which is Grade 2 star listed. He was not just an explorer, he was also a polyglot. He spoke 29 different languages, and he was also a prolific writer. Now at university he taught himself Arabic, falconry and fencing, and he joined the army where he was posted to India, and he became completely fluent in Hindi, Gujarati, Punjabi, Sindhi, Saraiki and Marathi, as well as Persian and Urdu. And while he was in the army, he kept a load of tame monkeys, hoping to learn the language, and apparently he learnt 60 words or sounds with which he could communicate quite well with them. I mean, this is amazing for that time. I mean, he was born in 1821. Now, this is another interesting thing about him. In the interest of research, he adopted Sikhism, then Sufism, and then he converted to Islam, getting circumcised and living like a Muslim. He could recite the Quran from memory, which entitled him to call himself a Hafiz. He then went to Medina and Mecca during Ramadan, disguised as a Persian man and calling himself Mirza Abdullah the Bushri. He spoke Persian or Farsi or whatever you want to call it. He also spoke Arabic, and as you can see on the screen there, he really dressed the part. I think he had a little Indian boy with him as well. Now, of course, because he wasn't really Muslim, he sort of converted in a way to it, but he hadn't officially been Muslim. But if they discovered him, he probably would have been executed, because you're not allowed to go to Mecca if you're not a Muslim. But he did the whole thing, and he was taking copious notes. He did all the going around the Kaaba. Later on, the Royal Geographic Society funded an expedition for him to explore the lake regions of Central Africa. So he went off in search of the source of the Nile, and he was the very first European to see Lake Tanganyika with John Hanning Speke. And he had a lot of near misses along the way. At one point he was attacked by 200 warriors in Somaliland. A javelin actually impaled one cheek and came out the other, and he had to run away with the javelin still impaled in his head. So he wasn't actually very keen on the Somalis, as it happens. But if you look at old photographs of him and also paintings, you'll see the scar in his cheek. If you have a look there on your screen, you can see quite clearly big scar near his eye, which is where the javelin went through. Now, along the way he learnt all the languages, and all the different African languages as well. He also had some very strange customs. He was obsessed with sex and sexuality, and he'd measure the tribesmen's members
This guy sounds amazing.
He was amazing. Yes, he'd measure them along his travels. He was obsessed with measuring them and taking down the length and well, it's a family channel, so
that's enough.
but you know what I'm talking about.
I wonder what his proclivity was.
Well, he was. I mean, he had a wife. In fact, his wife. He was very, very close to his wife. She came on a lot of his travels. In fact, it was his wife who set up everything in there. The stained glass windows. It was all thanks to her. He'd also write and participate in various sexual techniques with these tribes people, male and female. Certainly, we do know that he was very much interested in homosexual acts. He wrote about them, and we know that he partook in lots of various things around Africa, yes, yeah. I mean, he actually he translated loads of saucy books. He translated the 17 volumes of the 1001 Nights, or the Arabian Nights, as is also known. It's still the only complete translation of the works, and it also included a 14,000-word essay on homosexuality, which was for many years the longest and most explicit discussion on homosexuality in any language. He also translated the Kama Sutra into English, which was an unknown publication in the UK at the time. Now, of course, because of the Obscene Publications Act of 1857, it would have been completely illegal to publish all of this, but he got around it by creating a subscription-only service called the Karma Shastra Society, which meant that none of it was actually officially published for the general public. Whereas all of these things were done in sort of like a series which people could subscribe to. And he thought about what would happen to his wife after he died, so he actually kept back loads of them to be published with the instruction that they should be published after his death, and the money goes to his wife to make sure that she was looked after his death. I mean, he just sounded like such an amazing man. Now, his wife Isabel, who is buried in the mausoleum next to him, persuaded a priest to perform the last rites on him, even though Burton was never actually a Catholic himself at all. He was not at all a Catholic. As I said, he'd adopted Sikhism, Sufism. He said he converted to Islam, and he even dabbled with Mormonism when he went over to the United States. But he himself always said that he was an atheist. He was an atheist, and when Isabel buried had a priest perform the last rites on him, which meant that he could be buried here at this Roman Catholic church, his friends were really quite angry. There was a big sort of like, they were really furious because they believed that is not what Sir Richard Burton would have wanted, being an atheist. He would have been against that idea. But anyway, she did it. And they're buried together, and his mausoleum looks amazing. There are some steps you can climb up to look through the window at the tombs of him and his wife. And it is designed in the shape of a tent. It was completed just in time for his funeral on the 15th of June 1891. The tent is in the shape of one that he and his wife Isabel used while travelling around the Syrian desert. And on it you can see various symbols of both Islam and Christianity.
Wow, what a fascinating man Sir Richard Burton was, and it will come as no surprise to learn that there is a film about him, of course there is, called Mountains of the Moon, which came out in 1990, starring Patrick Bergin as Burton and Ian Glenn as John Hanning Speke. It only covers their adventures as they try to find the source of the River Nile, and of Speke's betrayal, having been tricked by the conniving Lawrence Oliphant, played by an exquisitely slimy Richard E. Grant. Now, while it's a shame that the movie doesn't tell of all the other amazing things that Burton achieved, one thing that I have to say is that the casting is absolutely spot on. Patrick Bergin looks a spitting image of Sir Richard Burton, and you couldn't find someone who looks more like Isabel, his wife, than Fiona Shaw, the actress. Wow. For some reason, the movie was a flop at the box office, but it's thoroughly underrated. Back then, of course, there was no Oscar for Achievement in Casting. That award makes its debut in 2025. But had that been a category back in the 1990s, Celestia Fox, the casting director of Mountains of the Moon, would surely be a shoo-in for the gong. Incidentally, Celestia Fox is best known for putting together the cast for The Little Shop of Horrors, so she's certainly no one-hit wonder. And talking of horrors, she is the auntie of Lawrence Fox. Yes, him. Yeah, so you see how much research we do just to tell you all these things. A lot of hard work, doing this. It's an educational channel. Yeah, so I mean, as I said, please help us. Let us make us feel good that we're being listened to. So just subscribe and ring the notification bell and be our patron if you want, and like us and write in the comments, whatever you want, but just engage. YouTube likes that. Anyway, let's move on to Mortlake Station. Yeah, so as you can see, we're at the railway crossing here. I do believe a lot of train drivers really hate this particular part because they're always worried that it might be open. This is the closest station to come to if you want to see the finish line of the boat race, and there's just the two platforms. It dates from 1846, just like the original barn station that we saw in episode 1. Now none, as you can see, it's just literally the stairs, and there's like a little bit of canopy thing over there. None of the original station remains, so this isn't listed at all, obviously. It is accessible though. Both platforms are accessible. You don't actually enter the train from here, that would be far too dangerous.
Here it comes.
And as I said, it's in Zone 3. Just like the other stations, and there's not really much more we can say about it, to be honest. It's just a station, Zone 3, nothing much to it. So let's move on.
We got goose by the gate.
Let's move on to the next place. Okay, yeah, so we see here Tappers Bar. And it's a good name for a tappers bar because they called it the Tapestry, and obviously we're talking about tapestry being such an important part of Mortlake's history, so they very cleverly decided to call their tappers bar the Tapestry. I like that. Here we have the Jolly Gardeners pub, and this big thing over here, this is the old brewery, the Mortlake Brewery. Going to show you that from the front. It's quite impressive. But yes, let's now just cross the road and have a look. Might have a quick look inside the Jolly Gardeners first. Okay. Oh, what side have we got? The Thatchers. Unfortunately, they didn't have cider. Well, they did have cider, but it's Thatchers. I'm not a big fan of Thatcher's cider. So in the end, we've gone for Kronenberg, which isn't my tipple of choice, but it will have to do so that we can enjoy this place. Let's have a little seat here.
Cheers, cheers.
So we're in the beer garden of the Jolly Gardeners. There's been a pub here actually at this site since well, we know there was a pub here called the 3 Tuns, Tuns, since definitely 1720, and we know that in 1796 it was renamed the Jolly Gardeners, but this particular pub, it was rebuilt, and this particular pub is from 1922. The Jolly Gardeners name is probably because there was a huge market garden just around here. Right now we're completely surrounded by the old Watney's Brewery, and we're going to have a look at that in a minute. But it's also known as the Stag Brewery, and it's also known as the Mortlake Brewery. Because it's very close to the end of the boat race, we're going to check that out in a moment. It's a very recognisable place on the route because that basically is the finishing mark. So everyone sees it. It's quite an imposing building. Unfortunately, it's going to change quite a lot. But we're going to show you that after these drinks. Okay, so there is the ship down there, the pub. This is the old Mortlake Brewery, or Stag Brewery is its other name. Used to be part of Watney's.
It's all going to be torn down. This was a working brewery up until 2015, actually. You see the little walkway that they have to connect the two together, sort of like a little walkway there. The Bridge of Sighs in Venice. And this is, of course, the more famous side of the brewery, because this is the one that you see on TV at the end of the race, when the exhausted rowers are nearing the end of their 4.2 mile or 6.8 kilometre ordeal, exhausted, like we are. Goodness me, we've done a lot of walking, haven't we, these past couple of days.
18 kilometres, nothing good.
Here's the ship. Now there's been a ship here since at least 1550, although we do know that it was called the Blue Anchor in 1617. It's now the ship, and it's had that name for some time.
Okay, now, so I'm going to be doing a voiceover for this little bit because they had the TV on inside the pub, which was playing music, and that was causing a copyright issue. But as you can see, it's a lovely old historical pub with a nice little outdoor bit, and also the outside hasn't changed too much, as you will appreciate from this lovely drawing from 1903 by Lewis Turner, courtesy of the fantastic Mortlake History website, curated by David and Helen Deaton. I cannot recommend their website highly enough. The link is in the description. Now, we've been doing these videos for some years now, and never have we come across an area of London with such a fantastic repository of archival photography and information, so thank you so much. And while Sharon cleans to the camera, allow me to talk now about the history of the name Mortlake.
Yeah, and I suppose here is as good a place as any to explain where the name Mortlake comes from. It sounds a bit morbid. It's not. Mortlake, nothing to do with death. In fact, nothing to do with lakes either. There are two possible explanations to the name Mortlake. If you look in the Domesday Book of 1086, it was spelt Mortelaga, and also it can be found spelt Mortelage, lage as in brunelage. So it depends also exactly what from Old English this name is taken. If the last bit, lake, comes from the Old English word lacu, which means a stream, then Mortelaga would mean the salmon stream. That's one option, but if in fact the lager or lage comes from the word lag, L-A-G, meaning meadow, then in fact the origins of the word Mortlake means the meadow of someone called Morta. So no one knows for sure which of those, which of that etymology is correct. I personally fancy the second one, the meadow of a person called Morta, mainly because a lot of those names they wouldn't necessarily be describing a salmon stream. They're more likely to be describing a person who lived there, because these places were obviously very, very small before. The fact that there was salmon in the stream, I don't think that they would have had the imagination to decide to call something after that, because it was just like a couple of buildings when it started in the old Domesday Book.
Okay, now a bit more about that brewery business. As we mentioned earlier, it is so important to have resources like the Mortlake History website, because London is changing so quickly, and Mortlake is no exception. I did show you earlier on, while we're in the Jolly Gardeners, a poster about an ongoing campaign to transform the brewery into a new development, and judging from that poster, I think you'll have come to the conclusion that not everybody is happy about it. Now, the developers' initial plans were to turn this into 1,250 units and create some pretty unsightly new builds with very little green space and jarring with the overall ambiance. Oh, and very little, 17% in fact, in the way of affordability. The Mortlake Brewery Community Group, mbcg.org.uk, the link is also in the YouTube description, set up a very well-run campaign to try and suggest alternative plans, and to his credit, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, listened to the group and opposed the scheme. So they've now come up with something looking a bit like this, but it's still going to go through a consultation process, of course. There's going to be fewer units, but only 6% are supposed to be affordable in these new plans, so it's even less affordable than the previous version. So it's likely to also hit a brick wall, especially considering the Mayor's own London plan aims for a target of 50% affordability in all new large regeneration schemes. So watch this space, or better still, check out mcbg.org.uk or their social media groups, links to which will be in the YouTube description below.
That's Chiswick Bridge over there. We'll obviously be talking a lot more about that when we get to C for Chiswick, which won't be too far away. And that black pole over there is the finish line. And as I said, that's where the exhausted rowers come. And the cocks. He, she, they. Yeah. And the cocks. He or she gets thrown into the water. The winning cocks.
Into the drink.
Gets thrown into the water at the end, and that's where the celebrations are and all the revelry, and of course lots of people sitting on top of the ship as well, enjoying it. That's the finishing line, and coincidentally that is also the finish for this particular series.
Let's get let's get the sun.
Let's get the sun and the finishing line. That's fine.
Oh, you want the finishing line?
Yeah.
Okay, well you gotta have those.
Yeah. So yes. Next we're going to be in Battersea.
Ooh.
Yes. Absolutely. Lots of cats and dogs and lots of other things to look at as well, including the famous power station, which is now, of course, luxury flats. And it's got a new station. It's the Battersea Power Station. It's just called Battersea Power Station, but it really should be called Battersea Power Station. That's this newest station on the whole of the tube network. Saying hello to the swans. Be careful, they might steal the camera. They're aggressive.
No, they're not particular.
He might go for the camera. Poor thing's probably starving.
Oh. That one actually, the plumage on that one has some colour in it. I wonder if it's a younger. It might be this year. See the colour on it? And they're not mute, by the way.
No. He just hissed.
It goes.
Sorry, I haven't got anything for you.
No.
Sorry.
It's all right. They come and go as they please. Tail wagging, as they say. It's very much like a slightly disgruntled. Are you? Really? Nothing?
Sorry.
Look at those feet. Perfectly adapted for sludge. There you are.
Very graceful.
Yes.
So this is the end. So we'll see you in the next episode. Till next time. Bye. Yeah. From Acton Town to Wimbledon, from Brixton to beyond, come love your London with us and sing with us this song. There's no more smog, but we've a vlog to brighten up your day. Come love your London with us, from Kew to Haringey. Come out with us and play. Love your London, have a banana.